Patch 14.6 had big changes where a lot of early game snowballing was taken out through items and support income. With these conditions and buffs to crit items, we have now entered a crit meta. Here's my 14.6 support solo queue tier list. Mages and Senna have been negatively affected the most by the early damage and the 200 gold nerf, while enchanters that work well with auto-based champions have gotten a lot better because crit ADCs are strong. Naturally, if enchanters are meta, hook champs are meta as well because they hard counter a lot of them in lane. Overall, this patch had a lot of big changes, and I'll be going over champs in B and above, starting with Senna. 14.6 was a pretty bad patch for Senna because of the 200 gold nerf to support items, and Serrated Dirt got nerfed by 5 damage. This doesn't seem that bad, but Senna has been getting back-to-back direct and indirect nerfs almost every patch. In 14.5, her Q80 ratio was nerfed from 50% to 40%. In 14.2 and 14.4, Bloodsong was nerfed for its range part, and in 14.3, Yuuma's got nerfed for the range portion as well. After all those nerfs, I think she is finally balanced, so I have her at the bottom of B. I usually have Nautilus pretty low on my tier list because I felt like he got stat checked and outscaled too fast, but that has changed in 14.6. With lots of damage being reduced from epic items and champions like Zeri and Jinx being meta, I think Nautilus is a good pick this patch. If your team needs engage and lockdown, Naut is that guy, but he does have a lot of losing matchups, specifically into most melee supports. You need to stay ahead for most of the game as Naut, because if you're behind, you just melt in team fights. I'm grouping Lulu with Milio because they have a very similar playstyle and pretty much function the same in that they work really well with auto-based champions. If they are paired with a hypercarry champ like Zeri, Jinx, or Kog, which are all currently super meta, they can make them pop off hard. Lulu and Milio are great champions this patch only if the ADC they are pocketing is decent, so that's like never. In all seriousness, I feel like Lulu and Milio are not great for climbing in solo queue because you have to rely heavily on one person to do well. Champions like Sona, Soraka, or Janna are a lot better because even if your ADC is terrible, their abilities work really well with non-auto based champions. Being able to have multiple win conditions is the best way of climbing, but the meta is favoring Lulu and Milio, which is why I have them at B. Nami isn't as great as pocketing hypercarries than Milio or Lulu, but she's better to climb with in solo queue because she can fit in all comps. She is the most well-rounded support that has CC, healing, and can buff her carries. Overall, I think she's pretty balanced and an honest champion where if you are good at her mechanically, you can pop off. Zyra was hit pretty hard with the 200 gold nerf to the support quest. If you play her, you know how brutal it is when you are behind trying to build Leandries and you're stuck at haunting guys and blasting wad waiting for that 850 gold. This combined with Zyra's base plants and Zazak being nerfed in 14.4 made her fall from being once in high tier to top of B tier. She's still a good champion to climb with because she has so much agency by herself, but she's just not as strong as before. Kicking off A, we have Renata. While she does pair well with a lot of meta ADCs, she needs to be picked into specific comps for her to do well. She is similar to Milio and Lulu, but I have her higher because if she is drafted against a dive comp paired with the hypercarry ADC, it's an easy win. You do have to rely on your AD carry when you play her, but the difference is that you can also make it impossible for the enemy team to play their comp. Renata can be completely useless in the wrong comp as well, so you have to know the right conditions for her to pop off. Alistar is a great solo queue pick because of his ability to make plays with his reliable point-and-click CC. He is one of the best tank supports because of his ultimate and is least affected by the 200 gold nerf because he doesn't need items to soak up damage. He's a great pick into most hook champs but can have trouble into comps that have long range. Camille had a big influence on the 200 gold nerf because she was building bruiser items as support and just 1v9ing games. Gold nerf definitely affects her the most because bruiser items are so expensive, but she is still a solid pick. Her effective range and all-ins are strong at all points of laning phase, and her ult is an amazing lockdown tool. Cam used to be a great blind pick because most people did not assume her to go support, but she's a popular pick now. If you respect her E-space early and she falls behind, she struggles to stay relevant in games. Leona benefits a lot from the damage nerf on items and the 200 gold nerf because she is naturally tanky from her W, so she doesn't need items to tank well. Leona got a really nice buff after they changed the rune shard so that it gives HP, and with this patch she is a very strong champ. She can stat check a lot of engaged melee supports and has great lockdown, but it's a little unreliable and her range is not the best. I'm surprised to see that she's not as popular because she is currently a solid pick. Sona has a bad rep for being useless because she is very weak early, but if she can scale, she can easily 1v9 games. I would recommend only playing her as a counter pick to an enchanter lane because it can be pretty brutal playing her into a high kill pressure lane. If she goes even in lane, you'll most likely win the game because once she has 2 items, your team can just stat check the enemy in most fights. Soraka had some really nice buffs in 14.4, leaving her in a great spot this meta. She does not synergize as well as Milio and Lulu with meta ADCs, but she can fit into more comps and has more potential win cons. Soraka can solo carry games and actually has a decent laning phase when played correctly. She does struggle against range supports where it's hard to hit her Q, but if she can scale up and get 2 items, she becomes very hard to deal with. Seraphine had a big rework done last patch where the goal was to make her more of a support than an AP carry, and Red did a good job at changing that. Seraphine support is actually sleeper OP because she has a lot of utility and her base damage is very high. She's a good blind pick because you can flex her as APC or support. Sarah's good into enchanters and melee supports where she can outrange them, but bad into mages and champs that can jump on her. Zilean benefits a lot from the nerf to damage on items and support gold because his biggest weakness is his early game. He won't get punished as hard in lane and the enemy can't snowball as much anymore. He's very similar to Soraka and Sona, where if he can scale, he can enable his team to pop off. He has one of the best ults in the game, and his kit works well with almost everyone. Bard was changed in 14.4, where they made him less tankier with less base damage but higher AP ratios. I actually think this was a really well made change because prior to this, he was one-shotting people with Bloodsong while being super tanky. Bard's not as degenerate OP because of the nerfs to himself and a lot of the items he used, but he is still a fantastic champ. He does have a bit of a weaker lane, but makes up for it in his ability to make game-winning plays. Poppy is one of the most underrated picks of the season due to her high base damage and her ability to counter all dashes in champions. She is one of the best Bloodsong users, which is a broken item if you can utilize the melee portion of it. Poppy is a great blind pick because people don't expect her to be support, but she does struggle against ranged champions that can sit back. This is one of the best patches for Braum because he not only works well with a lot of meta ADC champs, but he also benefits from the 200 gold nerf because he doesn't need items to tank. He does need certain conditions to do well, and I usually have him in B because of this, but in this patch he has a lot more opportunities for those conditions to be met because of the meta. He counters all hook champs and most melee supports, but can struggle into ranged champs that don't have to go in. I recommend playing him as a counter rather than a blind, so you have that set up if an auto-based AD carry while playing into an enemy draft where you can tank and block a lot of things. Maokai was nerfed 3 times in a row, but he's still OP. His strengths lie in his ability to engage and zone areas while not needing to be directly in the front line. Sapling Toss is one of the most broken abilities in the game because you can not only lock down an area, but you can also use it to check bushes. I have no idea why he doesn't get hard nerfed and why a lot of people stop playing him as much because he's still broken. Pyke is a great champ because he beats out most engage and hook supports. If he is drafted into a team where he can auto a lot, he can solo in games due to his ability to out-sustain the enemy in fights from his heals and ult. He can be just as useless if he can't auto anything, so he's best as a counter pick than a blind. At the top of A, we have Rell. She has always been a high tier champ because of her kill pressure in lane and her ability to create big plays with her engages. Rell is pretty much Leona but better because she is more versatile as her kit has more reliable lockdown. Rell has a hard time into champions that can disrupt her W, but that can be overcome if you play smart. Kicking off S, we have Thresh. He received some nice buffs in 14.4 that gave him more kill pressure in lane. He is one of the best blind picks in the game because of how versatile his kit is. You can find your way out of almost all situations because all of his abilities can be used offensively or defensively. He has one of the highest skill ceilings and is gated by how difficult he is, but his potential is almost limitless. Rakan is an extremely mobile engage tank that outplays the enemy through movement. He plays like a hybrid enchanter tank by shielding and healing his allies. I think the most broken thing about Rakan is not his movement, but the sustain on Q. Rakan can fit into most comps and his kit is versatile enough to deal with most situations. Blitz was nerfed in 14.2 and 14.4, but he is still one of the best supports to play. I think he will always be high tier because of his hook playstyle. Blitzcrank is always relevant because he can miss hooks all game but only needs to land that one game-winning hook on a carry. I would not recommend picking him blind because the enemy team can draft a lot of tank champs. He is better as a counter pick into ranged supports. Pyke received some insane buffs in 14.3 and ever since then he has been one of the best champs to play. He has a sink or swim playstyle in that he has all the tools to pop off and take over a game, but if he doesn't he becomes pretty useless. He is one of the hardest champions to play but has a very high skill ceiling, so his potential is gated by how hard he is to play. At the top, we have my personal favorite, Janna. Janna has been broken ever since she was buffed last season, and it's pretty crazy to see that she has not gotten any nerfs in all of season 14. She is broken because of how fast and how much damage she does. Janna does struggle against poke comps and champions where she can't peel anything, but she's so OP that you can just blind pick her. I saw a clip of Freaks saying that they plan to nerf her this upcoming patch, so play her while you can. That concludes my list. As a reminder, tier lists don't matter that much until you get to very high ranks. Play what you enjoy and you'll climb more. Thank you so much for watching and good luck climbing.